Hi, this is your host Swapnil Bhartiya and welcome to another episode of TFiR. Let's talk. And today we have with us Amit Shah, Director of Product Marketing at Dynatrace. Amit, it's great to have you on the show.
Oh, very nice to be here, Swapnil. Thanks for having me.
And today we are going to talk about the Dynatrace 2022 CISO Research Report. Before we go there, of course, we have covered Dynatrace on a regular basis. But since you're here, I would love to just quickly give viewers what is Dynatrace all about so that we will understand from the perspective of this report.
At the very highest level, Dynatrace's mission is to deliver answers and intelligent automation from data. And we do this in order to enable secure and flawless transactions. And we primarily focus on cloud applications, although we cover pretty much any kind of application. And we're a market leader in the observability segment. And so that includes everything from application performance monitoring to digital experience monitoring, infrastructure monitoring, and most recently now application security. And so, yeah, that's who we are and what we do. And we're in the application security space. We're fairly new, but we have a very unique observability field offering in the space that can add an additional layer of security for DevOps teams and DevSecOps teams.
Excellent. And that helps us to also kind of also understand what was the goal behind this report that you folks released. And if you can also talk about the frequency of the report. Is it the first time or you have been doing it for a while?
Yeah, so this is the second annual CISO report. We've been doing this since last year. And the purpose of the report is really just to uncover the current state of application security from a CISO's perspective. And we were trying to primarily understand how application vulnerabilities are being managed and whether, and how CISOs are feeling about the opportunities they might have or some of the challenges they might be facing as they relate to application vulnerabilities, whether they're open source components or custom code. It's one of the largest and fastest growing attack surfaces for most companies, and so it's a very important space that traditionally CISOs might not have had to worry about as recently as just a few years ago, potentially.
I will talk about the report in depth, but before we go there, I also want to understand how has the security landscape changed. Especially we are talking about cloud native work. But not everybody is moving to cloud. There are a lot of folks which are still on-prem, and there is a lot of applications which are running locally as well. So if you look at the whole evolution of how we are writing and deploying applications, how has the security landscape changed? Not only from the perspective of this report, because you have been doing it for 2 years now, but from your perspective in general, because you have been looking at the industry for so long.
There's a few different ways. I think the most important way in which whether your application is on-prem or in the cloud, I think it's undisputable that the pace of change and digital transformation are changing the application landscape, not just from a development perspective, from a monitoring and reliability perspective, but also from an application security perspective. There was a time when you could do releases of software once every 6 months, once every 18 months. The frequency of releases has now been shortened to anywhere from 2 to 3 times a week, many times up to just once every week or a couple of weeks. And so there's a very fast pace of development, and with that fast pace of development and digital transformation, that has introduced some new and unique challenges for application security specifically. 67% of CISOs say the development teams don't really have enough time to scan for vulnerabilities before any release or fix is moved into production. Log4Shell, for example, that was a fairly recent application security vulnerability. Less than half of CISOs that were surveyed in this report were confident that all Log4Shell vulnerabilities were fully eradicated, and this report was done like 3 to 4 months after Log4Shell first came out. And so this fast pace of development is one of the reasons why There has been, there's new challenges coming up in terms of application vulnerabilities. And so, 75% of CISOs are worried that too many application vulnerabilities are leaking into production, despite taking a multi-layer approach. And combine that with the pace of development and the fact that developers simply don't have the time to fix everything before it goes out. It means that CISOs really need a new way to add another layer of security at runtime to catch things that might have slipped through the cracks through the development process.
Now, when we talk about application security, what's also interesting, you talked about some points there, is also software supply chain, because what is happening is we are consuming more and more open source code base, and it's not just that applications are coming from different, or packages are coming from different sources. Within the same package, there are different libraries, there are different frameworks. Then there are if you look at just container images, there are different multiple maintainers and providers of the same package as well. So how much of that is also concerned, where you also have to keep an eye on the source or software supply chain of whatever is going finally into your application?
That's a huge concern. Like in most modern applications, more than 80% of the code base is composed of these open source components. And there are new vulnerabilities being discovered in these components all the time. There's a constant stream of new vulnerabilities being added to the CVE database, and a lot of them are severe. But the thing to remember about the severity of those vulnerabilities is that that is the maximum possible severity. That doesn't necessarily, just because a vulnerability is potentially severe does not mean that it's actually severe for you. And so what ends up happening is that your traditional ways of finding these vulnerabilities, like software composition analysis or vulnerability assessments, they typically only tell you the most severe outcome, or the most severe thing that could happen if the vulnerability was exploited. But the reality is that many times those vulnerabilities are not actually in the execution path of the application, meaning they're present somewhere, but they're not actually exploitable. Sometimes those vulnerabilities are not actually either adjacent to the internet, meaning they're not actually exploitable, or they're not next to any interesting source of data like customer data or anything like that. And so even if you were, and so they don't really take into account the vulnerability impact. And so teams are often then left with thousands of such vulnerabilities that they need to sift through, and there's no way to know which one is actually the significant one without doing a lot of analysis and spending a lot of time. And this is time that development teams simply don't have.
Now let's just talk about report quickly. Now, we had a very good discussion around how the situation, the state of application vulnerability. Now, just if you look at this report, how much of the discussion that we just had, some of the findings, they align with that, or if you can share, hey, these were some of the key findings which gave us insight to either you were expecting that, hey, this is what is happening, or you're like, oh my God, we would not expect that, and this is what is the reality there.
Yeah, so I guess one of the surprising things, if you want to call it that, of the report was how unsurprising some of the findings were. I think the fact that 79% of CISOs are worried that too many vulnerabilities are slipping into production. We knew that that's always a concern on the part of CISOs, but the fact that so many of them recognize it, I think at this point is somewhat interesting and surprising. The fact that vulnerability management has become more difficult with digital transformation is another something that you might expect, but it's surprising to see the level to which CISOs recognize this. 69% of CISOs feel that vulnerability management has become more difficult with digital transformation. But at the same time, and this was, I think, the true shocker for me personally, only 4% of CISOs actually have visibility into vulnerabilities in a runtime environment. They might know that a file that could be vulnerable is present somewhere in their runtime environment, but whether it's actually in production, whether it's actually being run or not, almost virtually nobody has visibility into that. And I think that to me was the most shocking or surprising result from this report.
When we look at this report, and also as you're talking about the vulnerability, how empowered are today's CISOs to actually, tackle these, risks that are there? When I talk about empowered, it could be either technological solutions that are there, cultural awareness is there, and third is also that the velocity that they have to maintain to release it. So because when you have vulnerability, you cannot update it, you cannot release it. And then last but not least, there's a big gap in supply and demand of skilled folks as well. So you don't even have enough folks who can do that. So talk about, when CISOs, they do look at this number, they talk about it, but they're like, what can we do about it?
Yeah, so tackling, I guess, from a people, process, and technology standpoint, how empowered CISOs might be to tackle these issues. I think from a people standpoint, finding security talent has never been harder, right? The CISOs are resource constrained, even more so than the rest of us. One of our partners, Sneak, they have an interesting statistic they say, which is that for every 8 developers, there's typically only 1 security ops person. The ratio for, especially given the rise in application vulnerabilities, it's very difficult for CISOs to find the manpower to do this, and so it becomes extremely important to have technology in order to be able to help really find what are the true vulnerabilities out there that you really do need to fix, so that you can continue to remain safe and secure. And so there are technology solutions like ours out there to help CISOs with that. With that problem. In fact, we are actually one of the very few the technology solutions out there that can help CISOs, tackle this problem and do so in a way that's easy to adopt, and in a way that does not introduce any additional risk into your overall application runtime. A lot of past attempts at solving this problem have resulted in application instability, have been really complicated to adopt, and so. One of the things that CISOs and everyone in general should be looking at is how easy it is to adopt these solutions, how much risk they add, and whether they actually provide, the insights required to solve the problem. So I think from a technology standpoint, it is looking promising. We're definitely here to help. From a process standpoint, again, there's been a lot of talk about silos between development and security, and so it's extremely important to be able to bridge those silos through a common view of what's happening within the application and in the runtime environment. And so a solution like ours, especially ours, is pretty uniquely positioned to provide that, because we are typically in use by development and operations teams, and now security teams can get an additional visibility that they were not able to in the past. So that's one way to break that silo, and the other way is through automation, like the handoff process from development to security, from security to development, has typically been one that's a little fraught, in part because developers and security teams are looking at different sets of data in order to be able to make decisions about how critical of vulnerability is. And so having one common view and automating the handoffs between development and security would be probably the way to address these concerns from a process perspective.
You talk about solutions. I do want to get quickly into Dynatrace solutions. So if you can just quickly talk about. Of course, you do have different portfolio for different, but if you can just specifically talk about application security, that would be great.
Yeah, for sure. So our application security solution is a unique approach to securing cloud native workloads. And we do that by providing an additional layer of security that complements all the other security tools and practices that you might have in place right now. Whatever it is that you're doing, you should probably keep doing it. Each one of these, serves a particular purpose. But in order to be able to solve the issues we mentioned around, just the alert storms, the ability to prioritize what you truly need to fix, automating handoffs. For that, we have a pretty unique solution. And we're constantly enhancing it, constantly adding new capabilities to it. But where we started with the solution is in runtime vulnerability analysis. And so that's the ability to see in your runtime environment, what are your key vulnerabilities, and how severe are they actually, by taking into account, whether the vulnerabilities are sitting next to, are they exploitable, meaning are they next to the internet? Are they critical, meaning do they have access to sensitive data? And we do this by being one of the few security solutions out there that's actually topology aware, and that's one of the reasons we're able to do this is because of our observability background. And so Dynatrace is one of the few observability solutions out there that is able to map the entire topology of hosts, entities, applications, processes, and so with this level of visibility, we can tell exactly which code is running where. Compare that in real time to one of the best vulnerability databases out there that's provided by a partner, Snyk. What happened? So, in a case in point, when Log4Shell was out, when that was first announced, our customers were able to pinpoint within less than an hour after this a vulnerability was announced, whether they had it in their environment, where it was, and what the urgency was in order to be able to fix it. So that's one part of the solution. Complementary to that, we also have DevSecOps automation, which would cover some of the process aspects that we just talked about, to automate handoffs between security and development and back. And we also have runtime application protection as well, which is the ability to detect and block common types of attacks, like SQL injections or command injections or JNDI attacks, the types of things that are commonly associated with vulnerabilities, whether they're open source or custom code. Because the reality is that even after you've identified a vulnerability in your application, you know where it is, you need to fix it. So rolling out a fix to it, if you're looking at an open source vulnerability to which there's a known solution, that could still take days or even weeks. And if you're looking at custom code, that could take weeks or even months to figure out how to best fix that vulnerability. And so in the interim, the customers have the ability to block the attack that would have exploited that vulnerability. So that's the third thing that we do.
When we talk about observability, without actionability, observability, knowing that something went wrong, that's fine, but doing something about it is equally important. So can you look at it from that perspective as well, and what Dynatrace is doing there?
Absolutely. And so coming back to our mission, our mission is to provide answers from data, not just provide you with the data itself, not just put it up on a pretty dashboard so that you can go and figure out what you need to do with it. And we do that through our Davis AI engine. And specifically within the application security landscape, the Davis AI engine is able to give you the true criticality of any given vulnerability by looking at where the vulnerability is in the topology of the application, again, whether it's adjacent to whether it's actually exploitable or not. So with that information, you can then decide whether or not, one, this is something you need to fix now, or if it's something you can do in the due course of application development processes, whether, and what mitigation steps you can take to prevent the vulnerability from being exploited. And so we're a firm believer in the ability to provide not just information and data, but answers as well with the use of AI.
Excellent. I think now I have everything that was there in my notes. Is there anything else, or you think that we have covered everything that was there today?
I think we've covered everything. Unless, so in case anyone wants to check out more findings, there's a real treasure trove of actionable insights in the report. I would highly recommend you go to dynatrace.com and find it in the resources section.
Amit, thank you so much for taking time out today and not only discuss these findings from this report, but also share your insights about how to actually, secure those applications. That was I think, most valuable and useful there. So thanks for sharing those insights. And I would love to have you back on the show, not just to discuss the next report, but to talk about how the whole security landscape is evolving and changing. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me, and thank you for the opportunity, Swapnil. It was truly an honor.